You're here because you want to get smart fast, to cut through the noise and understand what really matters.
And today, we're definitely doing that.
Yes, we are taking a deep dive into a really compelling figure, John Goldfinger Palmer.
Ah, Palmer.
Yeah.
A name that's, synonymous with some pretty audacious crime.
Yeah.
His life story, it really does read like a thriller novel, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And we've pulled together quite a range of sources for this deep dive. We've got news reports from places like Bath Crime News, The Independent, Daily Mail, Evening Standard.
A good mix there.
Yeah. And we've also got insights from his wife Marnie's book description, Goldfinger and Me, plus, the trusty Wikipedia entry.
Right. Useful for the overview.
Taken together, they paint this vivid picture of a man linked, allegedly, to handling the stolen gold from the huge Brinks Mat robbery.
And then becoming this massive timeshare fraudster later on.
Exactly. So our mission today, if you like, is to sift through all this information.
Yeah, try and get to the core of Palmer's criminal path.
We want to look at his supposed connection to Brinks Mat, the incredible wealth he somehow accumulated.
He did it, the methods.
Right, and of course the big questions that still hang over his violent death back in 2015.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Where do we start?
Let's start right at the beginning. John Edward Palmer, born in Solihull, September 1950.
Okay.
Started out apparently as a market trader, then got into gold dealing.
And that's where the nickname comes in, isn't it? Goldfinger.
That's the one.
Okay.
Apparently he earned it for, the incredibly bold act of melting down gold bullion.
Bullion linked to Brinks Mat.
Yes, linked to Brinks Mat, right in his garden, in Bath.
In his garden, wow.
Yeah, can you imagine? The sources mention a large detached house, battlefields, Lansdowne.
It's quite something, isn't it? Melting down millions in stolen gold, essentially out in the open, relatively speaking.
Shows a certain confidence.
Or maybe arrogance, yeah. And the sources also mention he had a shop, didn't he? In Bristol.
Yes, Bedminster, trading gold jewelry.
But it wasn't just a straightforward jewelry shop, was it?
No, not according to these reports. It was allegedly a key place for laundering stolen goods.
Including, crucially, that gold from Brinks Mat.
Right, which brings us neatly to the robbery itself. Brinks Mat.
November 1983, near Heathrow.
The big one. Still talked about as the largest theft in, British history at the time.
Yeah, the figures vary slightly, but around 23 million pounds, maybe 26 million of pure gold bullion just vanished.
And Palmer's name keeps popping up in connection with where that gold ended up.
He was definitely linked heavily to disposing of it, getting rid of it.
But, and this is crucial, he always denied knowing it was stolen.
Yeah, maintained his innocence on that point.
Yeah.
And quite remarkably, he was actually acquitted.
That was 1987, the Old Bailey trial. The jury believed him, or at least couldn't be sure he knew.
They bought his story that he was ignorant of where it came from.
But when you dig into the details in our sources now, looking back, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does.
They keep pointing back to his existing gold dealing business, the shop in Bedminster.
You'd think someone in that line of work would ask questions of, a sudden massive amount of raw gold turning up, it seems. Unlikely he wouldn't suspect.
Highly improbable, yeah.
And it touches on a sort of fundamental problem for criminals dealing with that kind of haul.
How to make it clean.
Exactly. Laundering that quantity of physical gold, turning bullion into untraceable cash, that's a huge challenge.
A logistical nightmare.
And the sources suggest that difficulty, the sheer problem of convoting it, was actually part of what helped unravel the whole thing for some involved.
Because you can't just, walk into a bank with gold bars.
Pretty much. Not without setting off all sorts of alarms. It's too conspicuous.
Right. And it's interesting, while Palmer walked free from that trial,
Others didn't.
no. Some of the actual robbers, Mickey McAvoy, Kenneth Noy,
And the inside man, the security guard, Tony Black.
they were convicted. Shows how the law can sometimes catch some, but not others in the same conspiracy.
Different roles, different evidence, different outcomes. And you have to wonder, that acquittal,
Yes.
did it maybe embolden him, getting away with handling the proceeds from Brinks Mat?
It's possible, isn't it? Maybe it convinced him he could aim higher, take bigger risks.
And the sources certainly suggest he did. They track his rise to just, immense wealth.
We're talking 300 million, estimated by the 1990s.
It's an incredible figure, enough to land him on the Sunday Times rich list.
Alongside the Queen, apparently, in 1996. Joint 105th or maybe 165th, depending on the source, still.
Still pretty remarkable company for someone with his background.
And this vast fortune, it wasn't from more gardening, was it?
No, the sources are very clear on this. The bulk of it came from something else entirely.
Timeshares.
A massive and massively fraudulent timeshare operation based mainly in Tenerife in Spain.
Yeah, the scale is just shocking. Defrauding something like 20,000 people.
Thousands, many losing their life savings, while Palmer's operation was just raking in millions upon millions.
And the way they operated, it sounds brutal.
It does. The sources mention these characters called clumpers.
Clumpers.
Yeah, basically henchmen, armed with baseball bats.
What for?
Securing the best spots on the street for touting timeshares, apparently, and intimidating any rivals.
So violence was baked into the business model.
It certainly seems that way. Not just deceit, but outright physical intimidation.
And it reportedly went further than that, demanding protection money from local bars.
That's mentioned, yes. And some really nasty accounts. Holding rivals over balconies.
Grief.
Even attacking a Spanish couple they mistook for competitors. It paints a picture of real ruthlessness.
This wasn't just, clever accounting. It sounds like gangsterism.
A very violent edge to it, yes.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, the financial side was incredibly complex, too.
How so?
Well, the sources talk about this huge network. 122 companies.
Wow.
Many registered offshore. Isle of Man, Madeira, British Virgin Islands. Places known for financial secrecy.
And bank accounts.
60 offshore bank accounts identified.
That is deliberately complicated.
Absolutely. Designed to make it incredibly hard for authorities to follow the money, to untangle who owned what. Layers and layers of secrecy.
But even with all that complexity, the law did catch up with him eventually, for the timeshare scam at least.
Yes. He was convicted, conspiracy to defraud, got 8 years in prison back in 2001.
8 years? Did that stop him?
Apparently not entirely. The sources suggest he actually continued to manage his criminal network from his prison cell in Spain.
Running things from the inside.
It shows how hard it can be to truly dismantle these large operations. Just jailing the boss doesn't always work.
And his reach was quite global, too, wasn't it? Something about Russia.
That's right. Interestingly, he opened the first Russian timeshare company back in the 90s. Shows the ambition.
So even when he died, he wasn't exactly retired, was he?
No, far from it. He was actually facing more charges in Spain at the time of his death.
What kind of charges?
Fraud again, but also firearm possession and money laundering. Still very much in the game, it seems.
Which takes us inevitably to his death. His violent end.
June 24th, 2015. He was 64.
Shot dead. At home, right? In Essex.
Yeah, his house in South Weald, near Brentwood. A gated property, supposed to be secure.
How many times was he shot?
6 times, with an 8mm pistol, the reports say.
And the weirdest part, they didn't realize immediately, did they?
That's one of the most unsettling details. Initially, it was thought he died from complications after gallbladder surgery he'd recently had.
So the gunshot wounds were missed.
Only discovered during the postmortem, which is bizarre.
How could that happen?
Raises questions, doesn't it, about the initial examination? But the delay, plus the manner of death, 6 shots, secure location, killer vanished.
It screams professional hits.
It points very strongly towards a planned professional assassination, yes. The hitman has never been caught.
So the big question then is, who and why?
And there are just so many possibilities, aren't there? The sources lay out a whole range.
Top of the list, maybe? The timeshare victims? Or rivals?
Definitely potential motives there. Thousands of people defrauded, competitors violently intimidated. He made a lot of enemies.
Then there's the general criminal underworld. Old grudges, missing money.
Always a possibility in that world.
Yeah.
And then there's the timing relative to other events.
Like Hatton Garden.
Exactly. The huge jewelry heist in 2015, Palmer died not long after. Police apparently investigated if he was killed to stop him talking.
Silenced before he can implicate others.
That was one theory being looked at. Plausible, given the stakes.
And what about the upcoming trial in Spain?
Another strong possibility? Maybe someone feared what he might reveal if he faced court, perhaps to get a lighter sentence.
Got a deal.
It happens. Or maybe it goes all the way back. Retribution for Brink's Matt. Decades later.
Still possible, I suppose. Old scores can run deep.
The sources even mention rival timeshare gangs, potentially the Russian mafia connection again.
Or other organized crime groups from Eastern Europe.
Yes, Albanian, Kosovan, Romanian groups involved in crime in the Canaries are mentioned as potentially having crossed paths with him.
It's a dizzying list of potential suspects.
And there's always the darker suspicion in these cases.
That he'd become an informant. A grass.
That fear alone can be a death sentence in the underworld, whether true or not.
And that statistic you mentioned earlier is chilling.
The number of people linked to Brinks-Matt who've died violently. Over 20.
It really paints a picture of a curse, almost. A very long, bloody shadow cast by that one robbery.
It does. And it wasn't like the police weren't watching Palmer.
No, they'd been probing him for years, hadn't they?
16 years, one report said, leading up to his death. Yet he was still operating, and ultimately someone else got to him first.
Shifting slightly, what about his family life amidst all this?
Well, he was married to Marnie Palmer since 1975. They had 2 daughters.
And she wrote that book, Goldfinger and Me.
Yes. Bullets, Bullion, and Betrayal. The title alone gives you a sense of what that life must have been like.
Living with someone involved in that world must have been extraordinary, in a terrifying way.
I imagine so. And his story clearly captured public interest, too. There was a BBC radio series about him.
Gangster, the story of John Goldfinger Palmer, shows the enduring fascination, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Figures like Palmer, they often become almost mythical, larger than life.
And his brother Malcolm, his reaction to the death notification was quite telling, too.
The initial confusion, believing it was a heart attack.
Yeah, expressing shock that the real cause, multiple gunshots, wasn't revealed straight away, just adds to the strangeness surrounding his end.
It really does. A very murky end to a very murky life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways for you? What stands out most?
I think, firstly, the enduring link to Brinks-Matt. Even with the acquittal, it seems inseparable from his story and perhaps his ultimate fate.
Yeah, that shadow looms large.
Then, the sheer scale and ruthlessness of the timeshare fraud. It wasn't just white-collar crime. It was brutal and ruined lives.
Built on intimidation as much as lies.
Exactly. And finally, the complete mystery of his death. So many motives, so many potential enemies. But ultimately, an unsolved professional hit. It leaves you wondering.
It really highlights how these huge criminal acts like Brinks-Matt can ripple outwards for decades, causing more violence, more unanswered questions.
Palmer's story is definitely a major thread in that web, but it connects to so many other dark parts of the underworld. It's a complex picture.
It absolutely is, and maybe that's the thought to leave our listeners with.
Okay.
Given everything we've discussed, the decades of crime, the countless enemies from timeshares to Brinks-Matt ghosts, the professional nature of his murder, what do you think is the most likely reason he was assassinated?
A tough question with no easy answer.
And perhaps more broadly, what does a case like John Goldfinger Palmer's really tell us about the long, dangerous reach of major criminal enterprises long after the headlines fade?
Something to definitely ponder.